has had a bone to pick with Kingpin for decades, and in Ultimate Spider-Man 12, he got some of that out of his system. On a comic page from the early 2000s that would never make it to print today, Spider-Man knocks the Kingpin of crime down a few pegs in a series of jokes and references about the man's mountain-like stature. Spider-Man didn't even just say the jokes like the way he usually does, which is like off the cuff kind of quips. He had them written out on multiple pieces of paper like he was reading the man's eulogy. Spidey was cooking these up for a while, and the payoff was totally worth it considering he defeated Kingpin in the end. But don't feel too bad for the guy. He did crush a man on camera and has been terrorizing New York at the street level, selling bad substances, so really, Kingpin had it coming. Ultimate Spider-Man was unhinged in the way only a teenage boy can be, which means, of course, your mom jokes are on the table when it comes to psyching out an opponent. In this case, Spider-Man is up against some troublesome muggers. They don't really take Spider-Man seriously at first because he's not wearing his costume. He needed a new one, but crime waits for nobody, so he is fighting in a mask, sweatpants, and a little sweater. I would say the thugs and Peter are at the same high school boy age of maturity, so when they do confront Peter about his lack of bodycon, Peter responds, "Your mom's washing it for me." And then he fights the guys and leaves them in a pile of webs on the ground. One of the thugs even says this experience will haunt him for years. Personally though, I think that when Peter is, like high school age Spider-Man, he is embarrassing all his villains when he meets them. Imagine being a grown adult and spending a bunch of money and time trying to end the world, and then some random teenager swings in and defeats you, all while attacking your insecurities in a series of well-timed jokes. Embarrassing. Anyway, Flash Thompson is a piece of work and a thorn in Peter Parker's side. Now, Peter can't really fight back at full power at school because that would blow his cover, but he does what he can. Take the basketball scene from Amazing Spider-Man, for example. But if Peter really wants to roast Flash and not get punched for it, he has to be wearing his suit. One of my favorite Flash-directed roasts from Spider-Man happened in the show The Spectacular Spider-Man. Across the board, Spider-Man is like on something else. He is so funny in this show, and we will mention more one-liners down the list, but for Flash, Spider-Man just saved him from a threat, and Peter is given the perfect chance to roast him when he is sitting bewildered a few feet in front of him. Spider-Man says, "Appreciate the help, fanboy, but keep clear, you're not pretty enough to save twice." And he said that to him in front of his whole friend group. How would anyone ever live that down? Think about high school boys. That moment will follow Flash for the rest of his life. Sticking with the Spectacular Spidey thing, Kraven the Hunter might have bested Peter in the comics, the traumatic Buried Alive comic, just for an example, but in the Spectacular Spider-Man, Peter got the upper hand. After Kraven acted, well, like Kraven, Spider-Man asked the guy where he was from. Hunter shared Mother Russia by way of Mother Africa, and the Spider's response, "Wow, two moms and still so ill-behaved. No wonder Kraven buried him." Again with the Spectacular Spider-Man, now focusing on everything this kid had to say about Rhino, my god, he would not let this man breathe. I mean, he is easy to insult, like look at him for 2 seconds, just the fit alone, and Spider-Man has material for days. Take the interaction from season 1, episode 6, for example. Rhino is breaking and entering the Daily Bugle building looking for Peter, and surprisingly, Jameson is the one to slow him down with a series of excuses, to which Rhino says, "What, do you think I'm stupid?" And Spider-Man swings in with, "Well, you are dressed stupid," gagged. Then in episode 11, after Rhino escapes from prison, Spider-Man says, "Ah, Rhino, I knew no prison was wide enough to hold you." Rhino does laugh at this, promptly for Spidey to double kill with, "I knew they taught trades in the Slammer, but a sense of humor." Unhinged behavior from him, and then in a later episode after defeating the Rhino again, he calls out for the crowds to come admire the world's largest dehydrated turtle. At what point do you just give up and find another city to bother? Rhino's threshold for embarrassment is admirable. Sometimes some villains get a bit too high up in the world and think they're untouchable, but Spider-Man has no problem bringing them back down, and I mean that literally. In Marvel Adventures Spider-Man 21, Stiltman makes his appearance. You can probably guess from the name, but the guy walks around in a super tall metal suit where the legs are in fact stilts. He's not only physically high up, but also mentally taunting the city as he robs banks and other bad things. Concerned citizens are quick to find Spidey and ask how he will possibly defeat a threat like this, to which Spidey says it will take a very sophisticated and specialized technique of tripping him. The villain goes down and only escapes because of his buddy, but he does get defeated in the end. Still, so embarrassing, like everybody in the city saw that. Peter Parker's roast of Harry Osborn in the PS5 Spider-Man 2 game is completely out of pocket and yet surprisingly not out of character at the time considering he had a sim connected to him. It's so funny, it deserved a spot on this list. Peter, MJ, and Harry are having a chat/disagreement because Peter has been acting strange. Both MJ and Harry ask Peter to give up the sim suit in some way, so Peter is a little on edge. It's also important to note that Harry is like visibly unwell in this moment, kicking a guy when he's down. When Peter is showing hesitation to give up the suit, Harry makes a side comment, and Peter took it very personally. For some reason, he decides to go straight for the jugular with the response, "Why don't you pop some more pills and say what you're really feeling?" Harry was not doing a thing to Peter in this particular moment. He was literally just sitting in a chair and Peter went off. Sure, maybe Harry wasn't being a menace to society in this moment, but Harry Osborn does become Green Goblin later in life, so it counts. No one in the Osborn family is safe from the wrath of Peter's wit though. Norman Osborn, the Goblin King, has been on the receiving end of many a Spider-Man roast, to the point where he can tell it's the real guy based on his battle commentary. Back when Peter mind-swapped with Doc Ock and then passed in his body, Doc Ock took up the mantle of Spider-Man and fought crime around the city in Peter's place. This meant that the villains Spider-Man often encountered began receiving very different treatment than what they were used to. When Peter, of course, returned to life and then to his own body, Green Goblin knew right away because suddenly Spider-Man was funny again. The jab that caught Goblin's attention was he had just finished a whole monologue about how Peter would have nothing left, to which Peter responded, "Except the dignity of knowing I never carried a man purse." Iconic, what can I say? It took Green Goblin like less than 5 seconds to realize Peter had returned, and then he promptly detonated a bomb and tried to escape. J. Jonah Jameson has been Spider-Man's biggest hater since day one, and at some point Spider-Man has to draw the line. After years of being slandered in the media, Spider-Man decided to take him to court, and it's as chaotic as one would expect and completely embarrassing for Jameson. His own son testifies against him, then a police officer, then his own staff, and finally the web slinger himself, Spider-Man. Everyone collectively agrees that Jameson has had an unreasonable vendetta against the hero, but Spider-Man's moment on the stand takes the cake for sure. First off, he gets away with wearing his mask on the stand thanks to an Avengers identification device. Peter does start with actually answering the questions, but when directly asked why he believes Jameson hates him, Peter has the most out-of-pocket response that again would not fly today. He says, "After some very serious thought and soul searching, I think I figured it out. The real reason Jonah hates me is because I'm black." This is Peter Parker, Wonder Bread, Wonder Boy, Caucasian male. Of course, J. Jonah Jameson immediately starts stuttering and claiming that he had no idea and pulls the "I have friends" card until Spider-Man takes mercy and tells the court that he is kidding. But he really did have Jameson for a minute there. Paste Pot Pete got so embarrassed during his run-in with Spider-Man, he literally just walked away from the fight to change his name. Defeated by laughter, only Spider-Man can make that happen. Let's set the scene. It's Spider-Man, Human Torch 1. Spider-Man senses someone is taking an aim at the Human Torch, so he steps in to fight the villain. The villain, of course, pulls the whole "I am the Human Torch's greatest enemy," and he's on a roll, really, but then he says his name, Paste Pot Pete, which is a stupid name, sorry, and Spider-Man promptly hits the floor laughing, saying "Paste Pot P," and laughing so hard he shoots webs from his nose. Pete is literally so embarrassed he doesn't even try to fight the Spider-Man rolling on the ground and just leaves with, "That's it, I'm changing my name."
In its end, the Flash. Red Death is a speedster that is an evil combination of Batman and the Flash, which already sounds terrifying, but his story is really humiliating when you think about it. The Bruce Wayne of Earth 52 started off fighting crime with Robins, but they kept dying left, right, and center, obviously, but mostly because of voter call-ins. So understandably, Batman got darker and darker, becoming more extreme with his methods, and he just basically started killing every one of his villains, which honestly seems more realistic to me. Like maybe instead you quit fighting crime, but you know, beggars can't be choosers. This eventually leads him to Barry Allen, who refuses to give Bruce his Speed Force powers for understandable reasons. So Batman then uses his various rogues weapons to fight Barry and knocks him out. Once Barry was unconscious, Bruce tied him to the front of a cosmic treadmill powered Batmobile and drives them both into the Speed Force. When entering the Speed Force, Barry and Bruce end up fusing together into one being, and they turn into a evil Batman with super speed and a lust for killing, while Barry's mind is trapped inside of Bruce's body. Now, some of you may not consider this humiliating, but I think it counts, because like I'd classify that as pretty embarrassing, getting locked inside someone else's body when they're using your superpowers. So yeah, I'll at least put it at number 10. And at 9, Lord Death. Lord Death was a secondary villain that has not appeared too many times in the comic books. He also has a rather peculiar ability. He can't actually die. Whenever he's on the verge of death, Lord Death will actually enter a trance-like state and resurrect himself. How does one stop an enemy that can always come back no matter how many times you kill him, you ask? Well, the answer, for Batman at least, was a rocket. But seemingly not a bat rocket, which is hella unfortunate. Batman straps Lord Death to a rocket and then sends him up into space. Yeah, where the guy ends up spending all of eternity floating in the cold vacuum of ever-expanding space. Beating someone who is named Lord Death that can resurrect himself is kind of already like kind of a flex, but when you're just a mere mortal man and then you do it, it seems like it would be pretty humiliating if you ask me. It would have been more humiliating though if it was Batman using the bat rocket to send him into bat space for the rest of Baternity. I apologize for all the bat puns. I know it was a bit of a stretch, but I have to get my daily pun quota out there somehow. And at 8, Green Lantern Corps. In Dark Knight's Metal, we see a very dark version of Batman from an alternate universe within the Dark Multiverse. In that universe, Batman was given a Green Lantern ring. Batman has indomitable willpower, so he was deemed worthy by the ring, which is actually pretty understandable. The power ring came with some protocols though that ensured that no Green Lantern could ever misuse the most powerful weapon in the universe. Batman not only broke those protocols with his will, but he also outsmarted the entire Green Lantern Corps that had come to stop this rogue lantern. So I think it's safe to say this is pretty damn humiliating for the entirety of the Green Lantern Corps, because Batman defeated every lantern that came to stop him. But he had enough willpower to actually break the willpower of the ring, and then he was able to use it for nefarious means. Like, that feels like it would be like the ultimate kick in the gonads. At least like if lanterns themselves had gonads. Can like the collective consciousness of the Green Lantern Corps just like manifest like a giant sack for Batman to kick? Because at this point that's what he did. And it's 7, Crazy Quilt. After his eyes were injured in a robbery, Crazy Quilt underwent an experimental procedure which resulted in him seeing nothing but blindingly bright color. This of course somehow turned him into an insane criminal. How insane? Well, first of all, he tried to steal color itself, which no one ever figured out how he planned to do. And second of all, his powers were basically constantly having a illicit substance trip, that is an acronym, that is like LED, which affects literally no one but himself. Even when Crazy Quilt got a helmet that allowed him to project his like crazy eye color lights at people, all Batman and Robin needed to do was like turn a mirror on him and reflect the beam back, and he was done. In all honesty, I don't even think Batman needed to do much here to actually embarrass him. I mean, like, the dude calls himself Crazy Quilt. I think that says enough. Like, I don't know a single person who is scared of quilts. Like, what do you think this name is gonna do? And even if he didn't name himself, I feel like that just adds an extra layer to it, you know? Like, why do you think that they called you Crazy Quilt? Because you want to steal color? No, it's because you're crazy and don't scare anyone. And at 6, the Gotham Mob. Batman's "You have eaten well" speech from year 1 may just be the most iconic moment in Batman history. It's the definitive Batman moment in the definitive Batman origin, as the Dark Knight formally announces his presence to the Gotham underworld with an entrance that the Kool-Aid Man would have been very proud of. After blowing up the dining room wall of a Gotham mansion where Carmine Falcone was hosting a get-together with the big criminals of the city, including GCPD Commissioner Loeb, the Dark Knight proceeds to deliver an all-timer of a monologue, vowing that from this moment on, none of you are safe, before extinguishing the last light in the room and leaving in hushed silence. Prior to this sequence, every single mobster and crook in that room thought themselves to be untouchable, but in one fell swoop, Batman eliminates any sense of security that they may have had and brings them crashing back down to Earth. It's one of the most iconic Batman moments of all time, incredibly intimidating, and considering how the whole mob was just bested by one man, pretty embarrassing. Halfway through into number 5, Condiment King. I think this is pretty obvious. I mean, like, Condiment King was meant to be an embarrassing villain. But the first meeting between him and Batman in Batman the Animated Series is absolutely amazing. The Condiment King first appeared in the episode Make 'Em Laugh, voiced by Stuart Pankin. He was whimsical and made many condiment-based puns. For example, the big bad bat guy, I knew you'd catch up to me sooner or later. How I relished this meeting. You, the dynamic Dark Knight versus me, the conceptual Condiment King. Come, Batman, let's see if you can cut the mustard. However, Batman wasn't down for games, since as Condiment King said cut the mustard, Batman just punches him in the gut, much to Condiment King's surprise. He falls down and was like, you punched me! Like, yeah, of course he did. And then Batman proceeds to tell him point blank, look, Mustard Man, or whatever you call yourself, obviously you're new at this, so I'll go easy on you as long as you give back the loot and promise never to try this again. To which the Sultan of Sauces, he slips on ketchup and falls off the balcony he was standing on, grabbing onto a neon sign to save his life. So yeah, definitely deserving of this list. In at 4, the Riddler. Last time I talked about a specific instance in which Batman taunts Nigma in front of Green Arrow, but Batman literally solving any riddle that Nigma sends his way is pretty much always humiliating. Like every single time, Nigma thinks that he's come up with like the most genius thing, or that Batman will never solve it, or at least he thinks it will be a tough time solving it, and then Batman solves it and Nigma is just left defeated. Like I know it's not like in the typical sense embarrassing, but I feel like at this point like the Riddler should have just like given up, okay? He's been beaten so many times. He's the Condiment King of the recognizable and popular rogues. He doesn't really do much, but he's there to kind of like toy with you until like, you know, the world's greatest detective actually uses his brain. You see, if the Riddler had revealed the whole 3 Joker thing instead of the Mobius chair with a riddle, okay, that would have been something. But instead, he's like a walking fudgesicle stick. He doesn't really need Batman to embarrass him, he does it on his own. Although I haven't seen the Batman yet, so maybe he's better in that movie. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Dr. Death. Dr. Death, aka Dr. Carl Helfern, is historically the first supervillain encountered by Batman. In his first appearance in Detective Comics number 29, Dr. Death develops a lethal chemical agent from pollen extract and enacts a plan to use the poison to extort money from wealthy Gotham City citizens. In an attempt to evade capture by Batman, Dr. Death ignites chemicals in his laboratory, presumably killing Jabba, his partner, and himself in the resulting explosion. He comes back in the next issue with the same plan, but Batman intervenes in the plot and upon apprehending the Doctor, discovers that Dr. Death's face is horribly disfigured from the lab explosion, resulting in his whole body having a brown skeletal appearance. But that doesn't stop Batman from basically dismembering this guy in Batman number 29 from 2011, where he just absolutely kicks the out of this hideous creature, saying, let me help you with that, this is when I hurt you, and then proceeds to help snap his bones. So yeah, this is like the second worst thing that happened to Helfern, the first being looking like that. Penultimately, in at number 2, Lex Luthor. Close on the heels of the incident of No Man's Land where Lex Luthor tried to unsuccessfully take over the city of Gotham, the DC villain was so angry at Bruce Wayne for ruining his project that he actually cooked up a plan to put Bruce behind bars. Lex approached David Kane, who was upset at Bruce for another reason, and enlisted him to make sure that Bruce would be the main suspect for the murder of Vesper Fairchild, who the millionaire had been seeing for a while. It's actually a plan that works too, for Bruce is eventually arrested for a crime that he didn't commit. It takes Bruce nearly a year to clear his name, but once he does, he gets Lex back in one of the most incredible ways that someone has beat Lex. Batman shows up, beats Luthor down, and then tells him, quote, "You are penniless, Luthor. As of this morning, Bruce Wayne owns this property, and he wants you out of the building." Considering how Luthor's whole identity is wrapped around trying to beat heroes using his tech, losing that tech to Bruce Wayne buying out his building definitely would put a bad taste in his mouth. And finally, in at number 1, Bane. Of all the characters that have broken Batman, Bane is arguably the one who did it the most successfully, because he actually broke him. Everyone loves to talk about the back-breaking beatdown delivered during Nightfall, but the build-up to that saw the masked mercenary preside over the Dark Knight's complete psychological breakdown as well, as he was forced to negotiate a mass breakout of Arkham Asylum and Blackgate Penitentiary. The two would have had their brushes in the following years, but their feud was taken to a whole other level during Tom King's run of Batman in 2016. In that series, series, Bane had to become dependent on the Psycho Pirate in order to kick his addiction to venom. Batman also needs the Psycho Pirate though, in order to help Gotham Girl, so he assembles a team along with Catwoman to go to Santa Prisca to abduct him. Bane and Batman fight once again, which actually ends up leading to Bruce suffering another spine-related injury, only for the Dark Knight to deceive Bane by faking a Catwoman double cross, which allows the feline fatale to then break Bane's back and complete their plan. So yeah, Bane got his back broken. I mean, Batman didn't do the one that wasn't the one who did the kicking in this instance, but still, he helped. Okay, it's good enough for me. And at 10, Superman. The Dark Multiverse is a mysterious dimension. It lies outside of the normal universe. In one of the many universes in the Dark Dimension, Superman went rogue and killed off every hero and villain. No one could actually stop him. The last remaining hero was of course Batman, who could not even believe that his best friend could have done all this. But Batman had a plan. Fail-safe. Surprise. He had studied Doomsday's body and created a virus that could turn himself into a version. Batman then became Doomsday, killed Superman, and then decided to spread this virus all over the earth, turning everyone into a form of Doomsday, which not only humiliates Superman, but also kind of embarrassed Batman himself. I mean, like, he probably went nuts because of the whole, like, he was part Doomsday thing, but still. And at 9, Kalibak. Batman had gone toe-to-toe with the New Gods on 2 occasions prior to the New 52, in Comic Odyssey and Final Crisis respectively, but this time he came with a vengeance. In the wake of Damian Wayne's death in the finale of Batman Inc., Bruce happens upon Ra's al Ghul's attempt to resurrect his son in a Lazarus pit, along with his former lover Talia. He prevents the head of the demon from bringing them back to life, as they would emerge as Raz's servants. But before they can actually, like, stop Damian's body from being resurrected, his body gets snatched, and his dead son is ripped from Batman's grasp. And then, this guy heads back to Apokolips. This leads Batman to deploy the Hellbat armor and venture all the way to Apokolips to retrieve his son, and in the process ends up fighting Darkseid and Kalibak, the Lord of Apocalypse's faithful son. And at 8, White Martians. Grant Morrison's Justice League run features the world falling under attack from the villainous White Martians, and it's up to the Justice League, obviously, to stop them. Also, like in the cartoons version of this story, the decisive blow is finally dealt by Batman, who is so badly underestimated by the White Martians because he lacks the superpowers of his fellow teammates. The White Martians managed to capture all of the Justice League and assumed that Batman was killed when they shot down the Batwing. However, the Dark Knight had survived the wreckage because of his plot armor and deduced that they were just as susceptible to fire as Martian Manhunter, due to the fact that they didn't come near his burning plane. Batman swoops in, sets everything on fire like a pointy-eared Human Torch, and saves his teammates. Another lesson in why you should never underestimate him, which reminds me of when, like, Oliver Queen shot all the Dominators with their own gun in the Invasion crossover on the CW after escaping Dreamworld, which is still one of my favorite Arrow episodes. And at 7, Cersei. Amazon's Attack was a short crossover that released in the build-up to Final Crisis. The comic saw Cersei manipulate the Amazons into invading the United States, believing that Wonder Woman had been detained by the Department of Metahuman Affairs, which wouldn't really make sense given that she's an Amazon and not a metahuman, but anyway. The Justice League was sent in response, or chose to go on their own at least, and wouldn't you guess it, Batman is right in the front lines. The Amazon Attacks crossover sees the Sorceress underestimate Batman and suffer embarrassment as a result. Batman enlists the help of Zatanna to defeat Cersei, and the League's preeminent magician casts a spell on the Wonder Woman adversary that renders her powerless for a short period of time, allowing for the Dark Knight to get the drop on her and lay the groundwork for Wonder Woman to swoop in and deliver the final blow. And at 6, Deathstroke. When it comes to comics, Batman and Deathstroke have faced off with each other on many occasions, with no definitive results going one way or the other. One of the most recent battles in the aptly titled Batman vs. Deathstroke comic saw the two fight into a stalemate. It's a fitting conclusion with a duel between the world's greatest detective and the world's deadliest assassin. Bats and Deathstroke then fought each other on top of a cable car dangling over Gotham Harbor. And just as when it seems as though Slade has gotten the upper hand, the Cape Crusader is able to ensnare him with his grapple gun and save the hostage position nearby, at least in the short-lived Beware the Batman animated series, which was released for 1 season in 2013. Deathstroke may be one of the deadliest figures in the DC universe, but that didn't stop Batman from giving this Terminator reject his just desserts. Halfway through into number 5, Darkseid. Bruce Wayne was at first not really taken seriously by Darkseid. As a matter of fact, Batman uses the element element of being underestimated as like his greatest superpower basically. Batman doesn't kill, but he was forced to kill when Darkseid threatened Earth. The only known substance that could kill a new god is radion, so Batman shot Darkseid with a radion bullet and caused himself to die in the process. Darkseid, for that matter, had Batman as the last person in mind that could actually stop him. He thought if anybody was going to kill him, it would be Clark Kent, so yeah. Up until this point, the only human or sentient being, for that matter, that has truly made Darkseid, the god of evil in the DC universe, cower and run away is Batman. In it for Reverse Flash. A pride point for basically all speedsters, especially evil speedsters, is how fast they can move, how they're faster than a speeding bullet, and how they're basically impossible to hit. So imagine our surprise when Reverse Flash ends up getting popped in the head by none other than Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline, so that Barry Allen could access enough speed force to save the world and bring his son back. And while this apparently killed Thawne, that was far from it. Thawne actually started vibrating as fast as he could to slow the destruction of his brain. This actually gave Thawne more time to try and avoid death, or to try and find a way to do so, and gave him the ability to hold quite the grudge. Humiliated by getting killed by Batman of all people, Thawne sets out to be even worse than usual, even ripping up the letter that Thomas Wayne gave to Barry to give to Bruce. The only contact that Bruce has had with his parents since they died. The only contact with a living version, which is absolutely brutal. Batman was like ugly crying, and ooh, it was not pretty. Getting close to the end into number 3, the Riddler. Batman Universe is an absolute gem of a comic. The series spotlights Batman in a time-traveling, universe-spanning adventure that takes him all the way from present-day Gotham to Thanagar, then back in time to the Wild West, where he meets Jonah Hex, and then all the way back to the present again. This series starts off somewhat innocuously, however. It's kind of simple, with a confrontation with the Riddler. Only Batman can tell that something isn't quite right. The Riddler's riddle this time was simply, when is the Riddler not the Riddler? And both the Dark Knight and Alfred agree that this is way below Nigma's usual standard. After chasing Riddler down and asking why he's stolen a priceless Fabergé egg, Batman also expresses concern at Nigma's behavior. It comes off as sincere concern, but there's an element of condescension in there as well, about how Riddler just isn't riddling like he used to, and honestly, he's trash at the moment, basically. And it's even more obvious that this is kind of Batman's tone when Green Arrow shows up and Batman literally says, "You're embarrassing yourself in front of Green Arrow. Are you feeling alright?" Which is kind of a dig at both Nigma and Oliver. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Justice League. The Justice Buster Batsuit is a mech suit part of Batman's Fenrir contingency, designed to take down the entirety of the Justice League, making its feature appearance in Batman Endgame when the Joker used his virus to warp the brains of the Justice League as the beginning of his Endgame plot. Batman was forced to use the Fenrir protocol to eliminate his teammates. The suit was successful in eliminating Wonder Woman, the Flash, and Aquaman, but met an even match at the hands of Superman. After a lengthy fight, Superman tore through the armor and nearly killed Batman until Bruce used kryptonite chewing gum and spit it in Clark's face, rendering him unconscious. Come on! Like, imagine waking up to learn that you passed out because Batman spit on your face. Like, seriously, bro, please brush your tongue when you brush your teeth. Your breath is absolutely lethal. Not to mention the miniaturized red suns for Knuckles, ancient Greek supernatural weaponry, super fast servers, and electromagnetic nerve trees for a sensor array that are also in the suit. And finally, in at number 1, the Joker. Mad Love is one of the most beloved episodes of Batman the Animated Series, but the story of the episode was first told in the show's tie-in comic, The Batman Adventures. The story provides an in-depth look into Harley Quinn's origin and the full extent of her abusive relationship with the Joker. After her anniversary plans end with her being thrown out of a window by Mr. J, she decides that the only way to win her Puddin's affection is to capture and kill Batman. And she succeeds, well, at capturing. But Joker isn't happy about that. If anyone's gonna take Batman down, it's going to be him. And he lashes out at Harley once again, leaving him alone with the Dark Knight. Batman and Joker then fight, obviously, but Batman's able to use Harley's successful scheme to his advantage, taunting the Joker that she came closer than he ever has to actually killing him, and concluding this joke by calling him Puddin', which is one of the funniest things I think Batman has ever done. Being usually a brooding and dark hero, hero who still refuses to kill despite his darkness. Calling his greatest enemy by his girlfriend's pet name is one of the best moments for Batman ever.
At number 10, it is the time when Iron Man almost kills a non-Cyttorak powered Juggernaut. In this exchange, Juggernaut is on a tear, and Thor, Ghost, Luke Cage, and Iron Man appear to try and put a stop to him. Iron Man warns Juggernaut with total confidence to stand down because the numbers are against him. Juggernaut then basically hits L2 and activates his taunt saying, "Then it's almost even." Should not have said that. So instead of humoring any more of this back and forth, Iron Man promptly follows through with his threat and blasts Juggernaut, almost killing him. The blast he hits him with is a sonic beam that he's used before to put down a whole regiment. The attack injures Juggernaut so badly that he's basically like steaming and bleeding from every orifice on his face. It's so bad that Luke Cage has to stop Iron Man before he kills the Juggernaut there and then. And it's pretty clear that Juggernaut had no idea that Iron Man would dominate the battle this much. And it becomes one of the many moments where Iron Man is able to come through and show everyone that he's not only one of the most powerful in the room, but that he's also willing to follow through. Okay, at number 9, we have the time when Iron Man is called to free hostages from an enclosure made of adamantium and vibranium, two of the strongest materials in the known universe. Remember, adamantium is the metal that reinforces Wolverine's skeleton and what his claws are made of, and vibranium is what Black Panther's weapons are made of, which can absorb and amplify sonic energy. So when Cardiac traps his hostages in a massive enclosure made of these materials, he clearly doesn't believe that there's any chance anyone could thwart his plans. But when Iron Man arrives on scene, he promptly backs himself up and basically turns his body into a human missile, rocketing towards the enclosure and busting a huge hole in it with his fist. This allows oxygen to enter the chamber, giving the team much more time to eventually save the hostages entirely. He does break his arm and a few ribs, but once again, he takes a villain's confidence and absolutely shatters it with his supreme power and iron will. At number 8, we have an event that is counted widely as one of Iron Man's most powerful feats. Mandarin and Iron Man find themselves facing off against a common enemy, an army of dragons led by Fang Foom and Chen Su. And the dragons seem to be winning. After some pretty close calls, Iron Man and Mandarin seem to be at a stalemate, realizing that the dragons are just not letting up. At this very moment, Chen Su morphs back into dragon form and makes a final appeal to Mandarin for the rings, citing their power and how he is ill-equipped to control them himself. Iron Man realizes that this may be true, but that he is much more than a man, so he could himself unleash the true power of the rings, and he does. He grabs Mandarin's hands and unleashes an enormous explosion that levels a few mountain ranges as well as Fang Foom and Chen Su in one go. This is another moment where a major enemy underestimates Iron Man's superhuman abilities and pays the price for it. At number 7, we have the time when Iron Man escapes the black hole created when Godkiller self-destructs. What's embarrassing about this event is that Godkiller's intentions are to take Iron Man with it in the blast created by its own self-destruction, and it's very sure that it'll accomplish this task considering Iron Man is aboard it. Godkiller is basically a giant suit of armor and Iron Man is in it. That's strangely hard to explain, but I think you know what I mean. And I don't blame Godkiller for having high expectations for this final feat, considering the black hole it ends up creating is the size of Earth, meaning that it would have 24 times the mass of the sun. So that means that the only thing Godkiller miscalculates, much like everyone else on this list, is Iron Man's strength, speed, and durability. And yeah, Iron Man comes flying out of the black hole, escaping the close call with his life completely intact. And that means that Godkiller obliterates himself basically for nothing, allowing Iron Man to escape to safety, despite the pull of 24 suns on his back. Godkiller gets absolutely owned here, but at least he's not alone. He's got the other 9 villains on this list to talk it out with. At number 6 is the time when Iron Man unhinges a plan set by the Raxon Corporation when they detonate a deposit of vibranium to try and destroy a fleet of battleships. Basically going back, it starts with a battle between Iron Man and Namor, which is interrupted by the realization that Raxon is trying to gain control of a whole island due to a deposit of the highly valuable metal vibranium mentioned earlier. When a group of battleships close in to prevent this from taking place, the corrupt corporation decides to detonate the vibranium so that no one can have it. and it seems to be part of the plan to destroy these battleships in the process. But what does Iron Man do? He decides he wants to control the narrative and physically tows the 5 battleships away from the explosion. This makes it so Raxon just destroys the vibranium for no reason. And Iron Man does this with one of his old armors too. He can't help but show everyone that he has the strength to change everyone's plan at any given time and leave them in the dust wondering what happened. At number 5, we've got the time Iron Man shields up right as the Hulk is about to hit him with a huge missile. It seems that at this point in the storyline, the Hulk feels that he's been betrayed by Iron Man, so he's very angry, as usual, and decides to abandon reason and use force instead, as usual. What's brutal about this event isn't just that the Hulk is basically one-shotted by the explosion, but also that Iron Man first rubs it in by schooling the Hulk on the make and design of the missile. He identifies it as his own technology and notices leakage that threatens an explosion that would send them both to Mars and back. So he activates a super powerful shield which protects him from the blast. And those visuals are just ridiculous, seeing the Hulk getting vaporized by the explosion as Iron Man's safe and sound in his little bubble. Not what the Hulk was expecting. Maybe it's time for that dude to start thinking before he acts, especially when he's in the presence of one of the best. Okay, at number 4 is the time when Iron Man fractures the Phoenix Force with his Phoenix Buster armor. Now, I'm not sure if the Phoenix Force can physically feel anything, let alone embarrassment, considering it's a cosmic entity powerful enough to shatter whole worlds like glass, but if it could, its face would be red and hot after Iron Man absolutely wrecks Phoenix Force, forcing it to split up into 5 pieces. And the Phoenix Force isn't the only one who should be feeling the burn from this huge win by Iron Man. Thor even fails to take down Phoenix Force with his hammer right before Tony succeeds at it. So Iron Man is just showing everyone up in this event. And this is a huge event that had been building up for a while. Phoenix Force had been posing a huge threat to the X-Men and the Avengers in this storyline. So Iron Man just showing up and blowing it up into a bunch of pieces is pretty humiliating for such a powerful being. I just like to picture Phoenix Force getting all geared up about taking out all these superheroes and then their plans having to change entirely after a little human in his own little armor appears to stop them in their tracks. It's just, yikes, wrecked. Which brings us to number 3, when Iron Man totally humiliates this fleet of guys wearing power suits that they think could combat his own. With their suits having the same firepower as some small countries, they expect there's no way Tony Stark could match up against them. In fact, Tony is even wearing his classic armor, which isn't quite as powerful as his updated suit, so they even have a better chance than usual to even the score. And still, they're made to look like fools as Iron Man easily evades their heat-seeking missiles and diverts them to actually backfire and destroy the armored assailants themselves. It's just an absolute joke watching him face off against these guys, carrying them around like they're action figures and throwing insults at them, and they seem so confident. That's what kills me about this list, is how confident all these villains are before Iron Man shows them who's boss. It just makes the wins all more embarrassing when they come. Okay, nearing the top of our list at number 2, we have the iconic face-off between Iron Man and Captain America. During the Civil War conflict, the Avengers are split into 2 different factions, one side being led by Captain America, the other by Iron Man. And as tensions escalate on either side, it finally culminates to a big battle between the 2 sides, and of course between Iron Man and Captain America themselves. But like everyone else on this list, Captain America somehow underestimates Tony Stark when he tries to pull a fast one on him and disable his armor. After what seems like a conciliatory handshake between Iron Man and Captain America, Tony notices a small electron scrambler device on his hand, leaving him open to a blow by Cap's shield right to the face. But as Iron Man is laying on the ground, petrified, he simply reboots his armor and gets back up. I don't think Captain America expects this either, because Iron Man flies at him and after an effortless fist fight, knocks him to the ground, almost severing his jaw with one massive punch in the face. This is high up on the list because Captain America is a very skilled strategist, and watching him get shown up so hard like this has to be pretty humiliating, especially in front of all his peers like that. Oof. At number 1, it is the face-off that Iron Man has against Magneto during the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. This event takes the top of the list because of the irony. Get it? The irony of this particular face-off, given that Magneto manipulates metal and Iron Man is made of it. Fans had been anticipating this face-off for some time, so when it came, everyone expected Magneto to take the W. And that includes Magneto himself. But in classic ingenious Iron Man fashion, Tony Stark shows up to the fight with a special non-metal armor made out of nanotubes, stealing this huge advantage from Magneto. But that's not where it ends. Iron Man then harnesses the power of Jupiter's magnetic field to power up his armor and take down the magnetic supervillain. And while Magneto is coming back for one final attempt, he's distracted by Phoenix Force, giving Iron Man the chance to knock him out properly this time. This is a huge embarrassment for Magneto since he's the obvious choice for this battle. It might take some time to recover from that one, and I'm not just talking about his physical wound. At number 10, we have the time when the Flash accidentally kills Reverse Flash by breaking his neck. This incident takes place in the Flash number 79 when Reverse Flash seems to be back to mess with Barry Allen's life again. Their beef starts when Reverse Flash kills the love of Barry's life, Iris West, and sends the Flash into a depression, naturally. But when Barry finally moves on and is set to marry Fiona Webb, Reverse Flash shows up again and tries to kill his new fiancée. So what does Barry Allen do? He swoops in and grabs Reverse Flash in a chokehold while he's in motion, thus snapping his neck and killing him right there and then. Which is pretty embarrassing considering Barry basically just uses Reverse Flash's own momentum to kill him. But following this event, the whole city catches wind of what happens and actually turns on Barry for some reason. I do not understand this. Reverse Flash kept showing up to kill his wives. At a certain point, you have to take that guy out for good. They even put him on trial and convict him, causing the Flash to pack up and move to a different reality, which is like the superhero equivalent of moving to a new town, I guess. Number 9 is a fun one. This one is about Kid Flash and the time that he actually throws none other than Superboy Prime for a loop by running around him in a flurry and even landing a few punches on him. What makes this super embarrassing is that Superboy Prime is trying to have a serious revelation about where the Flash has gone and what Kid Flash is doing in his place. There's been some kind of break in the timeline at this point, and Superboy Prime thinks that the Flash has been killed. And as this epic realization moment is supposed to be happening, Kid Flash is ducking and dodging around Superboy's blasts and just being straight up goofy about the whole situation. So not only does the Flash seem to cheat death here, but his youthful replacement is just absolutely toying with this hyper powerful villain and not even breaking a sweat. This moment serves a helpful purpose as well because the rest of the team is able to focus on their objectives while Superboy Prime is distracted. And on top of everything, Kid Flash ends up having a full-on reunion with his friend, totally ignoring Superboy Prime. This isn't something such a powerful villain is used to, being taken for a fool like this. I just feel like it belongs on the list. At number 8 is a pretty cruel one. In the Flash number 200, Wally West basically forces Zoom to relive the most traumatic day of his life on a loop for eternity. But once again, this is the result of Zoom attacking his wife Linda and effectively ending the life of the baby in her womb. Okay, what's the deal with everyone going after the Flash's wives? Honestly, this is a pretty hardcore punishment for Zoom and might even go further than embarrassment in its effect, but he sort of had it coming. I mean, if Wally wanted to, he could have probably just killed him once he caught him, but instead he decides he's gonna let the guy think about what he's done for the rest of eternity while living out the worst thing he's ever experienced. A villain like Zoom isn't used to facing punishment like this very often, but trying to take things as far as he did does have its consequences, even at the hands of an otherwise kind and forgiving superhero like the Flash. Don't mess with the fam, people, come on. He's the fastest dude in the cosmos. At number 7 is the time when, in the early days of the Flash, he basically gloats over the dead body of a villain he's just driven off the road. Something about the old-timey era of superheroes makes moments like this so much more bizarre because it seems like the writers haven't quite yet gotten the hang of the characters. Like, I don't think this is something the Flash would ever do again after this instance, but it's definitely a humiliating way to treat this enemy. In this scene here, this bad guy named Satan, totally unrelated to the fallen angel, goes flying off a cliff in a car and explodes in the wreckage on the ground below. And of course, the Flash is already there to watch it all go down. He just sort of stands over him with his hands on his hips and says, "I'm on hand just to see your finish, Satan. Thus ends the threat of the Faultless Four." Considering that superheroes are known to have more forgiving moral compasses, this is a pretty dark and humiliating end for this Satan guy. And he didn't even try to hurt the Flash's family or anything. Damn. Okay, at number 6 is the time when the Flash basically drives the Top completely insane. In issue number 215, during the event Identity Crisis, the Flash finally captures the Top and has Zatanna mind wipe him, turning him into a good guy. A once menacing and threatening villain, the Top is reduced to tears by the Flash after he is then forced to relive all his past evil deeds. And the Flash just sort of lets it happen. The Top becomes basically totally destroyed on the inside with guilt, facing his demons all at once as the Flash watches on. And tragically, the top basically ends things for himself after everything is said and done. But the Flash doesn't seem to feel badly about it at all. He even refers to it as a kind of experiment and something he might try and do again. When I read that, I was like, whoa, Flash, chill out, dude. I think you got him. You definitely defeated the top. You can just relax now. No need to try that out on anyone else. It's hard to watch, you know? What happened to putting people in jail and stuff? Alright, at number 5 is the time when the Flash kills Gorilla Grodd with a little sticky bomb. This is yet another savage moment for the Flash, or I suppose this is actually Scarlet Speedster, but he's filling in the role for the Flash, so it counts. During the Flash Annual number 3, the Scarlet Speedster is going back in time to correct some past evil deeds, you know, as he does. And on the way through time, he decides to take a quick stop at Grodd's lair. And while they duke it out for a while, the Flash decides that he's gonna take the gorilla out for good this time. So as he gets the better of Grodd, he plants a tiny sticky bomb on the ape and runs out of harm's way to basically watch the monkey go boom boom. As he's standing off to the side, his plan takes effect and the ape gets blown to smithereens right in front of him. What's humiliating about this moment is that Gorilla Grodd is just minding his own business before the speedster shows up and decides it's the end of the road for him. And as he's trying to disarm the bomb, or at least rip it off his skin, Grodd's fingers are just too big to get a hold of the tiny bomb. It's sort of a sad moment, really. But definitely pretty embarrassing for a villain that otherwise poses a decent threat in the previous storylines. Okay, at number 4, we have the time when Barry Allen, aka The Flash, of course this is a Flash list, breaks a tie on a vote for whether or not to wipe Dr. Light's mind. The rest of the Justice League is torn on the severity of the punishment for Dr. Light's assault of Sue Dibney, but the Flash, once again choosing to be a savage that day, decides he'll allow it to go forth, and turns Dr. Light into a shell of his former self, completely without identity and basically rendered useless. And Dr. Light is normally a super threatening bad guy, so this isn't a position that he's used to being in, you know, totally stripped of everything he's ever known like that, and it's all at the hands of the Flash. This dude can be a real monster sometimes, eh? Even when Batman finds out this happens, he's like, what the hell? And sort of confronts the Flash, who then, get this, mind wipes him too. I think this list is perfect for the Flash because he just seems to like doing business this way every once in a while. Alright, at number 3, we have the time when the Flash turns Inertia into a living statue and then puts him in a museum. This is a pretty brutal punishment once again, and definitely something Inertia is not expecting. I mean, who thinks they're going to be overpowered on this level? After Kid Flash grows up, he takes over the moniker of Scarlet Speedster, filling in the role of the Flash while the mantle is basically unclaimed at the time. But he's eventually killed by Inertia, which is a pretty sad outcome for Kid Flash. And when Wally West returns as the Flash, he hunts down Inertia and confronts him about this incident. But Inertia doesn't seem sorry at all. And this is when Wally West goes beast mode and freezes Inertia as a sentient statue and puts him in the Flash Museum. And remember, Inertia is still alive in there, taking everything in and very aware that they're probably going to be stuck as a statue forever. Visitors will come by and look at Inertia as part of a villain's exhibit, read the little plaque about him, go, oh, interesting, look, one point this guy was a pretty powerful villain. Look, his Latin name is Inerticus Godondicus. And you'll never be able to wreak havoc ever again. How humiliating. And honestly, sort of fair, all things considered. Okay, at number 2, we have the time that the Flash actually runs himself back to life. This is a feat that absolutely astounds Black Racer, who is basically a conduit of death, chasing the Flash to snuff him out for good. But the Flash runs into an issue, in that he will eventually run out of stamina if he keeps running for his life. So, what he decides to do is run so far into the future that he reaches the end of the universe. And what happens when they reach the end of the universe? Well, Black Racer can't go on any further, of course. And he sure doesn't expect this. Although I don't know why anyone could expect it, because if Black Racer can't go beyond the end of the universe, why can Barry? This question is hotly contested online and basically comes down to the explanation that Barry reaches the end of the universe before Black Racer can, basically causing death to cease to exist. So he doesn't just humiliate Black Racer, he humiliates Death, its creator. Death needed to create Black Racer, so Speedster couldn't outrun Death anymore, and for the Flash to simply thwart that plan by doing something as risky and badass as running to the end of the universe, it's just crazy, and it belongs on the list. Finally, at number 1 is the time when the Flash single-handedly destroys Anti-Monitor's antimatter machine. Although he knows it'll mean his death, the Flash takes on a machine that will otherwise kill everyone he's ever loved, and let Anti-Monitor take his final victory over humanity. So he does what he does best and runs really fast, encircling the machine and breaking apart its outer casing, blowing up some henchmen in the process. This basically renders the machine useless, and Anti-Monitor knows it. He doesn't even hide his panic either, as he screams out that the Flash is behind all this and that his whole plan is foiled. Such a huge enemy like Anti-Monitor getting taken out by one single tiny superhero is a pretty embarrassing situation, and it sort of proves that Anti-Monitor is totally underestimating the Flash and humanity itself. I mean, he even says it himself, 1,000 universes and more have died because of me. Yet those humans have thwarted my plans, and more than once. Ah! Then he flips out. I don't think this is a regular occurrence for such a powerful evil force, and it's all because of the selflessness and bravery of the Flash, letting himself die just to show up the Anti-Monitor one last time. I'm just picturing Anti-Monitor sitting at his desk reworking his plans after this goes down, like, ah man, okay, antimatter machine, no go, tried that, but failed. Man, maybe I've just lost my touch. Maybe I should find a nice universe where I can retire. Maybe I should just relax for a bit. How was that Anti-Monitor impression? Is that how you think he talks?
Number 10. General Koi and Prince Baran get spooked. Wrapping up the events involving Terra Verde's civil unrest and the face-off with Spore in issue number 23 of the original Wolverine series, Wolverine decided upon his return to Madripoor that it was time to give General Koi and Prince Baran a taste of their own medicine. While Prince Baran was a sometimes ally of Wolverine's, for this story he was more playing the role of sometimes villain or antagonist that he's also known for in the series. As such, in the middle of the night, Wolverine pays a visit to both men and kidnaps them. They awaken blindfolded in the sewers, where Wolverine explains the extent of what can happen if the vial of the drug that Koi chose to keep were unleashed on someone, how it would basically make them go insane. It could also potentially unleash a darker evil who was only just defeated, Spore. Really not cool for you to keep that vial, Koi. Koi and Baran fear that Wolverine has administered the drug to them, terrified. They discover, however, that this is not the case, and instead that the only threat in these sewers is an equally deadly and very angry Wolverine. Horrified, they run in fear and escape from the sewers, only to be laughed at by the people of Madripoor as they surface, covered in sewage. Hopefully they learn their lesson. Knowing General Koi though, probably not, because then he does a lot of other stuff. Number 9. Unintentionally embarrassed Sabretooth. Sure, Wolverine is all for putting Victor in his place. Once he met the guy and knew how bad he was, that is. But before that, the Creeds were just a family that Wolverine kinda got tied up in. Logan ended up captured and in a circus being used as an attraction. Something about the X-Men and circuses, I tell you, happens a lot. This was really a low point in Wolverine's life, as he was suffering from severe depression after the death of Rose, and then following that, the death of his wolf pack by Nathaniel Essex's Bear, which was really upsetting because he'd taken a lot of solace in his pack. In the end, it was Clara Creed who managed to reach out to Logan, saving him both physically and emotionally. The two fell in love with one another quickly, but it didn't end well for either of them. Saul Creed, Clara's little brother, sold them out. Once this was revealed, Logan felt the only way to protect Clara was to get rid of Saul, permanently. Clara was ready to cut Saul out of her life, but didn't want to see him killed. Because Logan killed Saul, she rejected him. And because Logan killed Saul, Victor interpreted it as a slight, embarrassed that Logan had been the one to kill Saul, as Saul was Victor's to torment. Victor would visit Saul each year on his birthday to beat him up. So yeah, hence why Sabretooth visits Wolverine each year now instead, because he was like, how dare you do this to me? This is unacceptable. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more times that Wolverine kind of embarrassed his villains, intentionally and unintentionally, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Blew up Dracula. If you've been surprised by Dracula appearing as a Wolverine villain in his current 2020 series, don't be. These two actually have a lot of history, and the mutants themselves have also tangled with vampires in general in the past. Old Man Logan even faced Dracula before, when mutants were disappearing and he was on the trail of tracking down his good pal and one of his sidekicks back in the day, Jubilee. This time around, however, Dracula seems to be interested in harnessing Wolverine's blood for its healing properties, and using the blood to help all vampires walk in the daylight without danger of going up in flames and perishing. Wolverine, however, literally blew up Dracula's well-laid plans when he took part in a plan to turn his body into a bomb. Well, more a devoid of consciousness clone body. This body was then offered to Dracula by his less than faithful servant Omega Red, which means instead of walking in the daylight, much of Drac's following instead went up in smoke, as Wolverine's clone's blood was altered to be like liquid sunshine to the vamps, thick with photonic cells, and so he became a dirty bomb. Or well, his clone became a dirty bomb. Number 7. Avon Calling. Not necessarily a great super villain of Wolverine's per se, but in issue number 30 of the original Wolverine series, Wolverine managed to embarrass a whole team of Madripoorian militia and palace guards when he was dealing with the masterminds behind the Lazarus Project. As he and his allies aim to infiltrate the palace and confront General Koi, Broker, not to be confused with the Power Broker, and Dr. Page, Wolverine walks right up to the guard, and when he asks who goes there, answers Avon Calling. Wolverine can be nonchalant and make jokes here because he's got Karma on his team. Rather than respond with an attack, Karma basically takes hold of the guard's mind and then has him take them into the palace under the guise of his prisoners. Of course, this ruse doesn't last for too long, but it does last long enough to get them into the palace at least, and to basically where they need to go. Number 6. Ruined Merchant's Auction. When Wolverine donned his patch disguise to return once more to Madripoor, it was quickly revealed to him that everyone kinda already knew who he was. And while he had come to save a former teammate from being auctioned off as a weapon, he himself ended up on the auctioning block. But although the merchant saw his presence as an opportunity, in the end he realized his mistake, as Wolverine didn't just get away with Maverick as intended, but pretty much ruined his whole auction and Merchant's whole catalog besides. You can check out how badly Wolverine ruined this party by checking out issues number 9 and 10 of the 2020 Wolverine series. Number 5. Resisted the change. Wolverine's healing factor doesn't just protect him from severe injuries, it also protects him against supernatural related monster rules, such as how they dictate transformations. And if he does end up getting affected by said rules, the change is typically only temporary for him. Eventually his healing factor will basically cure him. Case in point, when Old Man Logan faced off with Dracula during his hunt for Jubilee. Dracula managed to attack Wolverine and even bite him in this second volume of Old Man Logan, but the joke was on Drac. Wolverine's healing factor protected him from giving into vampirism, and we learned that he was immune to said bite and its effects. Sorry, Dracula. In the end, Wolverine came out on top, managing to later on decapitate Dracula. Obviously, he came back, but for the Prince of Darkness, King of Lies, Lord of the Undead, this was a pretty embarrassing defeat. Especially as he bit him and then he was like, yes, this didn't work, but that's fine. I'm sure it's taking all of your healing factor to fight off the vampirism. I don't know if it was actually taking all of his healing factor. He did look a little rough, but I feel like Wolverine was like, yeah, sure, bub, all of my healing factor. Number 4. Bad karaoke for Maverick and Merchant. Later on in the current Wolverine series, Maverick would take a job from Merchant, deciding in the end to work with him despite Merchant attempting to auction him off previously, and thereby putting Maverick in the crosshairs of Wolverine. With the two at odds fighting over information stored on a Krakoan bug, Wolverine in the end decided to let Maverick think he stole that bug back from him and his friend CIA agent Jeff Bannister, only for Maverick to learn later while handing it over to Merchant that the bug was actually wiped clean and the information on it replaced with tons of Johnny Cash karaoke, likely taken from performances at the Green Lagoon's karaoke night. Oh boy. Number 3. Omega Red versus the Wolverines. You mess with the Wolverine, you get a bunch of them that you have to deal with. You get all the Wolverines. As was evident when Omega Red came to Krakoa seeking to claim what his mutant given right was, to take refuge on the new mutant island nation. And, you know, not be condemned or anything, even though he did bad stuff in the past. However, not everyone was able to forgive and forget when it came to his past, namely Wolverine. Still suspicious of Omega Red, once it seemed as though he'd seen him appear outside of Krakoa and kinda trap him in ice, Wolverine was ready to confront him, already having an uneasy feeling about his former nemesis since pretty much day one. However, when Wolverine explained what had happened to him, to his family, they weren't ready to let him go in alone. He was joined by Daken and Gabby, who both showed Omega Red how easy it was to sneak up on him and get him in a trap. In the end, the discussion had to be tabled, but it was pretty fun to see the look on his face when the Wolverine family came together to attack him. If you were wondering where Laura was, by the way, she'd likely still be in the vault at this time, as per her adventures in the 2019 X-Men series, which is why she wasn't there. Otherwise, I'm sure Laura would also be there. Number 2. Found the perfect match for Solemn. After it was revealed that Solemn had taken Logan's Muramasa blade and ended up giving one such blade to the Iraqi pirate, Severe, during Solemn's escape from him, Wolverine tracked Solemn down. He confronted Solemn and was convinced to take on Sever with him together. Later, Solemn bailed on this confrontation in typical Solemn fashion, it seems. However, Wolverine had a few tricks up his sleeve. Realizing that he and Solemn were fairly even matched, he decided to call in some reinforcements. Wolverine went to the White Queen, Emma Frost, and had her join him in their confrontation of Solemn, which she was happy to do as she had her own score to settle with him. They pursued Solemn to the sliver of remaining Araco Island on Earth where he was hiding out. And let's just say that while Wolverine and Solemn could likely fight against one another all day to only really reach a stalemate, Emma was out of Solemn's league. She interrogated him, much to his dismay and embarrassment, because Emma of course can easily access almost anyone's hidden dirty secrets and desires, no matter how dirty and secret and hidden they are. So now she knows everything about Solemn, whether she wanted to or not. Number 1. Ultimate Family Jewels. Oh boy. Of course, a lot of embarrassing moments would come from the Ultimate Universe, wouldn't they? This one hails from issue number 12 of the Ultimate X-Men series. Here, Ultimate Wolverine and Ultimate Sabretooth face off, only for Wolverine to completely embarrass Victor in this fight. As Sabretooth holds Wolverine beneath the water, making him suffocate and killing his brain cells, Wolverine counterattacks by going for his, family jewels, as he calls them. His retort to Sabretooth mocking how he'll never be considered a brainiac now turns to tears and pain as Wolverine responds that at least he's smart enough to cover his family jewels in a fight before he tackles Sabretooth off a cliff. Wow, what a way to finish a fight.